Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Jeff Onan.
And happy June, happy Pride Month, and happy E3 season. So Jeff, we now know the actual fucking E3 schedule, which is nice because nobody's been talking, and few have, and we've been having to try to piece together rumors and innuendo about when the actual E3 events are going to happen. And as it turns out, it's going to be the same as it always was. Xbox is having their joint digital presentation with Bethesda on Sunday, June 13th, and Nintendo is having their Direct on Tuesday, June 15th. And of course, DK Vine will be covering both, obviously, and there will be live conversations on both nights, as well as a special live E3 preview Friday, June 11th. And I'm also, by the way, planning on going on my E3 bear hike, that grand tradition, where I go out into the mountain wilderness and attempt to encounter a bear, which is kind of our version of Groundhog Day. If I see a bear, that means a bountiful E3 for the DKU fans out there. I'll be doing that on the morning of Thursday, June 10th. So stay tuned to see if I see a bear.
And nobody asked, but I am wearing my traditional E3 pants, which I put on starting on June 1st, and then I don't take off until a DKU game is announced.
Yeah, no.
Every E3.
You've actually been wearing it since 2 years ago. It's missing E3 last year really fucked things up for you as far as that tradition goes.
I took them off when Mario Golf was announced.
Oh, okay.
But it was a short reprieve because now they're back on. So
yeah. So obviously, we don't know what to expect at E3 with all the Donkey Kong rumors. A lot of people are putting hopes and dreams into the Nintendo Direct. I'm skeptical as far as whether or not we'll actually see the game announced then or not. But then, there's always Rare. We don't know what Rare might show off at the Xbox presentation. Playtonic's always a wild card. We don't know. We don't know. We could get nothing, a big fat load of nothing, or we could get everything at once. I made a joke. Wouldn't it be funny if we didn't get the Donkey Kong game, but a new Banjo-Kazooie game was announced? That would just throw everyone for a loop. We'd have to completely change our gears and our mental capacities to okay, forget about Donkey Kong. Let's talk about Banjo now.
But don't worry, that's not going to happen. So we don't even really think too much about that, audience.
I just said, wouldn't it be funny? I'm trying. Look,
I would probably laugh. Yeah, I'd be like, this is funny stuff.
I'm worried about disappointing people as far as like the Donkey Kong game not materializing yet. I want to doubly disappoint people and have no Banjo-Kazooie game materialize too.
Well, I still believe in Kevin Callahan.
Oh, well, you're a faithful guy, Jeff. So anyway, be sure to follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Stay abreast on all the upcoming potential news. Either way, we're going to make the best out of this E3. So be sure also, bookmark dkvine.com. Is that still something people do say? Bookmark it.
People forgot about books. So the phrase just gets more and more out there.
Yeah,
it's like how the email symbol on the cell phone is a picture of an envelope. I don't even remember envelopes.
Thanks to Joy. Am I right?
It's political. That's American humor, so we won't explain it to our foreign friends.
dkvine.com/Patreon too. Your money helps fund our nonsense. And that's especially important E3 time because I basically dedicate my life to E3 and the coverage of Donkey Kong Universe news for like 9 days. So thanks for letting me eat, patrons. Thanks, I appreciate it. All right, Jeff. Welcome to a non-Sea of Thieves episode. Nice to have you here.
It's weird, yeah. It's like when you step onto land after being on the boat for a long time.
It's
what
exactly
do they call it,
like
your
that.
sea legs? Or
yeah. Hope you get your land legs. So let's rewind a little bit. I wanted to talk about a time period we don't often discuss here on the Kongversation. The mid to late 1990s.
Colonialism. Oh, the 90s. Okay.
No, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The 90s. Yeah. It never comes up on the Kongversation. But the mid to late 1990s, I was a kid, and the only responsibilities I had were schoolwork and mowing the lawn. So I had a lot of time for pleasure, and this is before I discovered masturbation. Jeff, believe it or not, I would use that time for playing video games. I would just play video games. I wasn't running a website. I wasn't making it my career. I was just playing video games because I liked them. And believe it or not, Jeff, I would use that time for playing video games to play games that weren't necessarily related to Donkey Kong.
Huh.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, look, when Donkey Kong Country came out in late 1994, it was all over for me. I mean, that was the zenith, the pinnacle, the top of the mountain for what games could be for me. But the problem was we were only getting a new Donkey Kong game twice a year. So that would leave a lot of emptiness in between, beating the games and replaying them a dozen times over. So I needed to find games that could be my emotional support placeholders in between the Donkey Kong games to provide a little taste of the aesthetic and vibe, the good vibes that Donkey Kong Country gave me. And I would play them and I would kind of disassociate from the actual game and sort of daydream about what the next Donkey Kong game might be like. And it was through this method. By the way, this whole thing of like me playing games that sort of reminded me a bit of Donkey Kong to help me get through those drought periods. That's a good conversation topic in and of itself. Like we could do a whole topic about those games that got me through those periods when I had time to play games that weren't DKU. And maybe we'll do that one day. But it was during this time that I had my one and only encounter with the Crash Bandicoot series.
Crash Bandicoot series?
Crash Bandicoot series. And I remember, because I have a very good memory, it was sometime in the summer of 1997. This was after Donkey Kong Land 3 was announced, but before we had seen screenshots or context for what it was going to be about. I mean, we assumed it was going to be Dixie and Kiddy Kong, but we didn't know the story or anything about it. So Donkey Kong Land 3 was announced, and this was months before Diddy Kong Racing was revealed. And it was shortly after Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Quest were shown off, but before we knew they'd become spiritual spin-offs via Diddy Kong Racing. So this was an uncertain time in the series, in the Donkey Kong fandom, the broad Donkey Kong fandom, mostly offline Donkey Kong fandom at the time. Because, we didn't know what we'd be getting or when, or, because of Banjo and Conker, if Rare was even starting to move away from Donkey Kong. So one weekend, my childhood friend Elliot, the mythical Elliot, he rented a PlayStation console, PS1, as people know it today, from Blockbuster Video. Because you could rent gaming consoles to try them out from Blockbuster back then. And he rented a PlayStation, this weird system with the weird triangle button, and it took disc. It's like, what the fuck is this? And he rented a game with it that came out the previous September, called Crash Bandicoot. And so I played Crash Bandicoot one Saturday that I spent over at Elliot's house. And I remember being taken with the aesthetics, obviously. I mean, tropical jungles, ancient ruins, that sense of adventure and exploration, and sort of linear action that drives forward. It's the same stuff that really propelled Donkey Kong Country. So being a Donkey Kong Country fan, and obviously Crash, I think the original Crash Bandicoot, at least, was modeled a little bit after Donkey Kong Country. I mean, this was still this time period where Donkey Kong Country was hot shit It was influential. It was very popular. It would make sense that they would pattern another animal mascot game sort of after DKC.
It's surprising to me this era when some of the big platformers that were being made for the PlayStation 1, they really were modeling themselves after Rare's games and not, this is pre-Mario 64 kind of when this started development. So the biggest platformer in the world was Donkey Kong Country, not Mario.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting era in and of itself. And I think then later you had Spyro, which in a different way, I think took some inspiration from Banjo-Kazooie, but we don't have to talk about Spyro. I don't want to get you so far out of your comfort zone, Hyle.
Well, Jeff, we'll be bringing up Spyro a little bit in this episode, but we won't go all in on a Spyro the Dragon tangent. But, I had an enjoyable time with Crash Bandicoot that Saturday. I mean, it was a tropical romp on an island with a cartoon mascot with attitude. I liked it. It wasn't my series. It felt like I was cheating a little bit, but I still had a relatively good time. I got to imagine what a Donkey Kong game in a similar mold would be like. And obviously that made an impression on me because Crash Bandicoot sort of became my go-to example of how you could maybe find a niche for 3D Donkey Kong after Donkey Kong 64 and all of the critical reevaluations I've had for that over the years. And, ironically, not knowing that Crash Bandicoot did sort of inspire the original direction for DK64 before the team realized it just wasn't a workable thing on the N64 and they scrapped it and just did Banjo-Kazooie again. I'm not here to relitigate DK64 though. No. But that's where my knowledge of Crash Bandicoot ends, Jeff. I never got a PlayStation. I've never been a PlayStation gamer. I became an adult and evolved somewhere along the way into a delicate hothouse orchid who doesn't play any games that aren't DKU. I wilt in their presence. I did catch back up with Crash a little bit when he became a fellow Skylander after Donkey Kong, but I mean, I know nothing about Crash beyond the little bit I played of that first game, that one day back in 1997. And yet most of my post-2010 colleagues here on DK Vine, the influx of editors who joined us around that time, like you and Cameron, and the general audience of the site, they all seem to be big Crash fans. Or at least big enough Crash fans that it often comes up in conversations I have with all of you. And I hear things, Jeff. I hear tales of glorious things that entice me, especially with all of the recent Nintendo EPD rumors about, potentially making a Donkey Kong game and the reflection that's caused all of us to have a little bit on the last decade of Donkey Kong. And then you combine that with the recent 20th anniversary of the Donkey Kong Racing trailer. And, we discussed this a little bit on a recent Stream of Thieves. And then Cameron and I went a little bit on a tangent on the previous episode of the Kongversation. And then you posted an excellent DK Vine forum thread about it in just the last couple of days. And that's what really inspired me. And I was like, all right, I know we have a lot going on right now. I know we have E3 coming up, but I felt like we needed to get this out of our system and make it a dedicated episode of the Kongversation. So here we are, talking about Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled and how that compares and contrasts to the Donkey Kong series.
Yeah, and so Crash Bandicoot, there's a classic article on ancient history DK Vine that I think might have been written by Aussie Ben.
Yeah.
Which was Donkey Kong and Crash Bandicoot, Strange Bedfellows, and it's kind of recapping ways in which those two franchises are similar. But I think that even that, which is now 62 years old, that article, with the history these two series have taken, there's a lot of interesting overlap. So Crash Bandicoot, sort of like Donkey Kong, it has gone through an interesting arc, and it had most notably like a 10-year gap between main entries. So sort of like Donkey Kong was a little bit on hiatus. Crash Bandicoot actually had a bigger hiatus, but it's not a competition. But both series eventually
Give it 3 years, Jeff.
Yeah, we're on our way. We're having our dormancy after our revival, which is not how the revival was supposed to work. But anyway, both series did get revived with a nostalgic, backwards-looking entry that harkened back to the originals trilogy. They each have an original trilogy, Donkey Kong Country trilogy and the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. But in doing so, in this kind of nostalgic revival thing, which is, these aren't the only two platformers to get nostalgic revivals. It's a big thing right now, but they had very different approaches. And Donkey Kong kind of stuck to a fairly bare-bones approach in regards to how much it's going to reference its own past, whereas on the very opposite end of the spectrum, Crash Bandicoot has been cashing in hard on nostalgia. And in doing so, it basically embraced the full history of Crash Bandicoot and redeemed even the least liked or least well-known, more obscure titles throughout that whole history and brought them all under one fan-servicey roof and kind of put the Crash Bandicoot franchise into this sort of modern renaissance, which had the remakes of the PlayStation 1 trilogy, the remake of the Crash Team Racing PS1 game, which was inspired by Diddy Kong Racing. They had a full-fledged Crash Bandicoot 4, which to have a game with that title is like having a game called Donkey Kong Country 4 in the title, and all the connotations that might bring with it. And then there's also a popular new mobile game. So through this run of games, the fan service present here is basically unprecedented in platforming games today. And it's a stark contrast to Nintendo's gun-shy sort of approach to referencing Donkey Kong's greatest games, let alone Donkey Kong's full obscure history. So while the Donkey Kong series is focused more on reviving and referencing kind of the tone or the visual styles, the gameplay concepts of their past entries, Crash Bandicoot has gone hog wild referencing specific characters, going to the absolute limits of obscura. And meanwhile, Donkey Kong's most memorable characters are on a road to nowhere. So the contrast, I thought, was kind of a fun sidebar for the conversation to look at and just kind of put a magnifying glass to the insane depths, of fan service. That's a Crash Bandicoot pun, Hyle. Don't worry, you don't have to get all these.
Will you explain it to me later?
Yeah. So Crash Bandicoot is like a mouse, but he's orange. He lives in Australia. Anyway, no. But actually, though, I do think it would be prudent to do a little bit of a history lesson for your sake and also for our audience sake, because this is a Donkey Kong podcast and not everybody might know what's up with Crash Bandicoot. So we'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it brief, but you know how much I like to talk about orange mice. So yeah, Crash Bandicoot, you probably know, started on the PlayStation 1. It was a trilogy of games by Naughty Dog along with a kart racer. And they all took heavy inspiration from rare games of the time, like we discussed. But then Naughty Dog moved on from developing the series. They didn't own the rights, which were under the Universal Interactive umbrella. And Universal had an agreement with Sony that kept those games exclusive to the PlayStation for a time. And then that arrangement expired. And so everything changed for Crash Bandicoot. Suddenly, the series went multi-platform, third-party on all of the different platforms, and it was no longer being developed by Naughty Dog. Universal ended up merging with Vivendi to become Vivendi Universal, and eventually would merge with Activision to create Activision Blizzard. And through this era, there were more sequels. There were a lot of sequels, and some of them were kind of faithful to the original style. Some of them were experimental and trying to evolve the franchise. Some of them were cheap or very little side games. They were handheld games. There were mobile games. But a big pattern here is a lot of throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. A lot of very aggressively tight deadlines and small budgets and games that were pushed out the door. And so the franchise kind of lost its notoriety that it had as one of the premier IPs of the PlayStation era. And every Crash Bandicoot game has its fans, but I think it's safe to say that it had been left in a bit of a mess after being passed around from developer to developer with no single overarching plan or style. And I think that'll sound a little familiar to Donkey Kong fans, which, kind of remind you of Donkey Kong's, quote, buyout era. And so they're very similar to each other in that way. But when the series died and went on hiatus, eventually things started brewing. Every hiatus, I think, for a beloved property does have to end eventually. So it draws another comparison to Donkey Kong in this way. But basically, before Donkey Kong Country Returns came out, the biggest taste that we had that we might be returning to Rare's style of how to present Donkey Kong was actually, in my opinion, in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, when they brought Diddy Kong to the forefront of Nintendo's biggest crossover. We didn't know it at the time, but that was kind of a teaser of what was to come with Donkey Kong Country Returns that was going to harken back to the country roots, at least in the style and presentation of it. And similarly, Crash Bandicoot went through a similar thing because the nostalgic revival of Crash Bandicoot was foretold by his own cameo appearance in Skylanders, where he finally reunited with his old friend Spyro the Dragon, and under a new design and new world that was harkening back to the style and world that he had on the PlayStation trilogy. So, of course, that was a teaser of what was to come as well, and we got Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy, which was full remakes of all three original PlayStation platformers, timed roughly around the 20th anniversary of the franchise. Of course, that was just a remake, planting the franchise firmly back in the past, and it didn't leave any room for them to incorporate or reference the many sequels and other history that followed those games. But that would soon change, which brings us to the main impetus for this episode to exist: Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, otherwise known as the biggest character reviving love letter that any platforming fandom has ever received.
Yeah, I remember that history vaguely. Like, I obviously knew it was a big deal when Crash came back as a Skylander, how many people were excited about that. And viewing Crash from afar in sort of my peripheral vision during that time, I remember the dark times for the Crash fandom. Obviously, as a Donkey Kong fan, we were going through our own drama and turmoil, which in retrospect doesn't seem quite as bad as we made it out to be, but hindsight is 2020, and now it's 2021, and whatever. I can enjoy Jungle Beat, and I can enjoy the Pay-On games, and I don't have to worry about whether or not Diddy Kong is going to be removed from the franchise. But, it's funny to me, the trajectory that arguably Crash, you could have, said it was on death's door after the weaker entries during the post Naughty Dog era, and that it was able to claw back in such a way that it did, because I feel like even ignoring where we've kind of wound up with Activision and all of the recent stories about their plans, it seems like Crash came back hard.
Right.
And we're Donkey Kong fans, and we're going to be getting into these one-on-one comparisons, but as you said, we've already had a revival, and now we're waiting for our next revival because the first revival petered out. and
I don't want to disparage all these sequels. I think a big piece of this episode is celebrating the history. And so I know that there are Crash fans that got into this series after Naughty Dog with the post Naughty Dog sequels, and I think there's not a one-to-one comparison between Crash and Donkey Kong, but there are games in the Crash series where I think in my head, like, okay, so this is the Donkey Kong 64 of Crash, and this game is the Donkey Kong Jungle Beat of Crash, and these games are the Pay-On games of Crash, and they're not one-to-one, but those comparisons exist. And, I think obviously there's Donkey Kong fans that got into Donkey Kong in the buyout era. So when Crash came back with a vengeance, obviously it was rooted in the Naughty Dog nostalgia, because those were always the games that had the biggest impact. But where they kind of are different from what Donkey Kong did with Donkey Kong Country Returns is that they then immediately started filling in the history. None of it was forgotten or erased or neglected, and that's where we come into here with Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled.
Yeah, this game, Crash Team Racing in general, Nitro-Fueled or not, is a game you, Jeff, have talked about for years. And you've talked about it towards me, as in, Hyle, you should play Crash Team Racing, because you go on and on about Diddy Kong Racing and how much of a shame it is that Diddy Kong Racing has never been able to successfully receive a sequel, Diddy Kong Racing DS notwithstanding. And how it's a shame that Diddy Kong Racing never influenced Mario Kart in a greater way. And all of my complaints, and you're like, but there is this other series that took direct inspiration from Diddy Kong Racing and evolved it and expanded on it. And Hyle, you're an idiot. And you never said that, but I could hear it. I could see it in your eyes.
Yeah, you could see me mouthing it because you can read lips. But yeah, in the Crash Race, I'm a huge fan of Crash Team Racing and the less good sequel, Crash Nitro Kart. I'm less a fan of Crash Tag Team Racing, the very different third sequel that came much later. But I'm not going to drag it through the mud because I know there's fans of it, and I know at least one of them is going to be listening to this. And I often go on and on about how those games did a lot of innovations in kart racers way before other kart racers did them. Like, for example, Crash Nitro Kart did the anti-gravity driving upside down on the ceiling thing that Mario Kart 8 does, except it did it 20 years sooner. Or not quite 20, but 15. Anyway, a lot of stuff like that. I'm a big fan of these games, and Crash Team Racing is not apologetic at all about taking its inspiration from Diddy Kong Racing, because they actually started the game out by building a prototype recreation of the track from Diddy Kong Racing, Crescent Island, just to see if they could make a Diddy Kong Racing styled track workable on the PlayStation 1 hardware. So that's where Naughty Dog was coming at this game from, was like, we're trying to make our own Diddy. And there's differences. The game doesn't have the different types of vehicles. It's all karts. There's no planes or hovercrafts. But the big kind of inspiration they took was the adventure mode, which is basically copied wholesale. I mean, you've got like the silver coin challenges. There's like an equivalent to that. There's like, I mean, basically everything that's in that Diddy Kong Racing adventure mode, they essentially copied in Crash Team Racing. And I think of it in a way like Crash Team Racing improved on Diddy Kong Racing in so much as Diddy Kong Racing improved on Mario Kart 64, which improved on Super Mario Kart, etc. But yeah, so we're getting to the 20th anniversary of Crash Team Racing, and they announced that they're doing a remake, which was huge for me. I mean, I texted a friend group of mine who had been hoping they'd do a remake, and I just was like, shared them the trailer, and then there was just like 5 eruptions of exclamation points, like, yeah, like kind of like when we saw Diddy Kong in the Donkey Kong Country Returns trailer. Just like the whole chat erupts with people saying Diddy Kong. Yeah. It was one of those moments for me in my gaming fan life. But Nitro-Fueled was a really cool remake, because what they did was they took the game, they recreated it in a modern graphical style, and faithfully recaptured all the mechanics and all of the nuances. And then they also, just as a bonus, threw in all the tracks and all the characters from that game's sequel, Crash Nitro Kart. So they're technically both remade in this one package, other than Crash Nitro Kart's story mode. And then they added an online mode. You could race online. So it was just this awesome kind of remake package. And it could have been it, and it would have just been like one of the best remakes. But they didn't stop there. They like many online games do, they decided to support the game post-launch with free additional content, in the form of these monthly kind of updates. And they added free tracks, they added more characters, and they added some skins, and there was ways for you to give them money if you wanted to give them money, but it was optional and stuff like that. You all, the song and dance. But through this method, they basically turned what was a really cool remake into an unbelievable celebration of Crash Bandicoot history. The likes of which I don't think any game has ever done for any other platformer. Even, people are going to talk about Kirby Star Allies, and I'm going to still tell you that's less than this because, they go hard. So that game, they started out with an already fairly extensive roster. They had 26 playable characters, but over the course of their almost a year of these monthly updates, they called Grand Prix, the roster eventually expanded to 56 playable racers.
Jesus.
And unlike Mario, they don't count like other color skins like Metal Mario. Like those are just skins. I'm talking 56 different modeled characters.
Oh, so it's not Cat Peach.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That would just be a costume in this game. They wouldn't count it as a separate character. And there are a lot of costumes, and we're not even going to get into that, but even the costumes have a lot of deep cut references within them. And there's dozens or hundreds of costumes. But and so they basically started adding more and more. And they added eventually every kind of quote unquote main or large featured character that you could imagine from a Crash game. All of them got in here. Then, they did the obligatory cameo with the Spyro franchise, which I even would have liked to see more, more crossover with Spyro, but that's okay. But eventually just started getting into, I wouldn't say diminishing returns. I would say they had to get into the delightful weeds. They had to start putting in stuff. It's like, well, we ran out of Kongs. I guess we have to add Blue Bear to the game.
By the way, everyone, the Delightful Weeds is also the name of Jeff's dispensary, so check that out.
Yes, it's right down the road from the other 5 dispensaries that are now in my town. So I thought it'd be cool to highlight a couple of these obscure characters with just a sentence of context, just to give some gravitas to exactly how obscure they are.
Oh yeah, because I'm not a Crash Bandicoot fan, but I am a huge fan of something, the Donkey Kong universe. And so this stuff is always fascinating to me just as a fan of something, to study another fandom and to kind of experience by proxy the same joy, like imagining an equivalent character that would make me excited. This is fascinating to me just as a fan of being a fan of something, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we all are a fan of being fans. So, yeah. Here's a few examples. One kind of the first cool obscure characters that showed up during this was these 2 characters named Chick and Stu. So Chick and Stu, they're cartoon chickens, and they were kind of these comedic narrators or race commentators in the 3rd Crash Bandicoot racing game, not counting mobile game spin-offs. And they appeared in the very first Grand Prix for the kind of DLC cycle as the hosts, as the commentating hosts of the DLC itself, putting together kind of an in-universe narration of the content that was coming. And then eventually they would be added as racers as well. So this would be like, I don't know, I can't think of an equivalent like Donkey Kong character, but it's like if Swanky Kong was the host of the DLC, but also if Swanky Kong had debuted in like Donkey Konga 2 instead of a real important game, and then another really big one. This one is the biggest for me because I'm psychotic. But Rilla-Roo, which is a gorilla kangaroo hybrid mutant, and it was only seen in a party game on the PlayStation 1 called Crash Bash, and whose only fan who ever mained Rillaroo in the obscure party game Crash Bash is on this podcast right now, and it's me. They added Rillaroo to the game. And, like, I mean, have you ever been a fan of something so obscure that you think you're the only person on Earth that knows it exists?
Yes. For more on that, visit dkvine.com.
I walked into that one. But yeah, Rillaroo is just nonsense. But it gets even worse because then you have Mega Mix. Mega Mix was a fusion of 4 famous Crash Bandicoot bosses that were monstrously put into one grotesque Cronenbergian body as the final boss fight of an obscure Crash Bandicoot Game Boy Advance side platformer, basically like like a pay-on game of the Crash franchise. And they said, hey, let's take that gross Cronenberg freak and we'll make a 3D HD model of him and put him in Crash Racing. Then there was Yaya Panda, who was a racer.
Sorry, the name Yaya Panda makes me laugh every time I hear it.
I think it's, I want to say it's pronounced Yaya, but it could be pronounced Yaya. Or Yaya.
I like Yaya Panda,
Yaya.
though. Yaya.
I like Yaya Panda, but I've never played a game that had Yaya Panda in it until this game, because Yaya Panda is exclusively from a few early mobile cell phone Crash Bandicoot racing games. And now Yaya Panda's in 2021 is a HD character in a racing game. And then we get into this is the crazy nonsense bullshit, which is the character Hasty. We talked about this on Discord the other day, but this is like next level. Basically, the story behind Hasty. Hasty is a quote unquote an original character created for Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, but it's a character that is an homage to a obscenely deep Crash Bandicoot reference. Because back on the original Crash Team Racing, a concept artist that worked on that game had posted some concept art online. And in the mix of that was concept art for a hippo character wearing an aviator helmet and jacket. And everyone just assumed, concept artist, here's concept art, that must be a character that was cut from Crash Team Racing. And at some point in time, I don't really know the history there, but the character became known as Fasty, and which is a refreshingly shit name. Love it. But so Fasty the hippo became embedded in Crash Bandicoot fandom legend. However, all of that story was an elaborate myth, because the reality was that although the same concept artist had posted that image of Fasty the hippo online, it was not concept art for Crash Team Racing. It was just kind of mixed in the mix. And it was actually a character that was never conceived to do with the Crash Bandicoot IP. It was for a totally different function, which was the mascot for an airfare search engine called Trippo. And the character was not named Fasty, it was named Trippo the Hippo.
Trippo the Hippo, right. That's also a shit name, though, just for the record.
Yeah. Oh, your website is called Trippo? I'll make your mascot a hippo. They're known to fly.
Yeah, I was going to say, what animal mascot better embodies the spirit of flight than a hippopotamus?
Right, the one that's permanently buried in mud. But the myth of the story was much larger than the facts, and the insane, probably drugged up on coke developers, I'm just kidding, guys, of Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, decided to honor this piece of obscure Crash Bandicoot history. And so they created a legally distinct new character named Hasty. And Hasty is a moose instead of a hippo, but otherwise is very clearly based on the character design and outfit design of Trippo the hippo. And now we have a brand new character named Hasty, just based on that ridiculous, stupid, insular fandom history that the developers were privy to.
So that would be like if they announced a new Donkey Kong racing game, and eventually one of the DLC characters was Carlos the Monkey, based on Super Monkey Carlo, the weird concept art that Rare had for their post buyout iteration of Donkey Kong Racing before it became Saberman Stampede. That would be the rough equivalent there.
Now I'm mad because I want Carlos the monkey, but we probably won't get him. But this is an episode for celebrating, not being sad. So eventually, Nitro-Fueled DLC did wind down. I think basically just because COVID hit, and they probably had more plans to continue, but it made sense to stop at that time. They had almost a year of free updates. But right about that exact time that they stopped is like almost like within a month, we had news that they were making Crash Bandicoot 4 and a new mobile runner game called Crash on the Run. So the momentum for the franchise just continued. And Crash 4 was kind of going back to the series' roots, being a direct sequel to Crash 3, but it had a lot of new stuff, it had a lot of playable characters that had never been playable before in a platformer. But the big thing that it did was that its plot revolved around the multiverse and hopping dimensions. And it sort of is a retcon for the franchise by going back to be a direct sequel to Crash 3 in a way that sort of implies that all the other sequels did not happen, except that the whole plot of the game is that they hop to other dimensions with alternate universe takes on characters. And it implies that everything that's ever happened in Crash has happened, just in some universe or another, and they all can pretty casually cross over with each other whenever they want. So it kind of is like we're resetting the clock, but opening the door to also reference whatever we want, whenever we want. Which is clever because it fixes some plot holes and inconsistencies, rather than just doing the reboot route that sort of doesn't care to preserve the stuff it wants to erase, which is kind of, I appreciate that aspect of it. But the same conceit of the dimension hopping, characters and stuff was also a big part of Crash on the Run, the mobile game, which is out now and also has a seasonal kind of update schedule with new stuff happening. So this episode's going to be out of date because by the through that mobile game, they're going to continue to add ridiculously obscure characters well after this episode airs. But yeah, just like we just did for Nitro-Fueled, I wanted to call attention to a couple of the obscure characters that show up in Crash on the Run, the mobile game, which in the mobile game you fight some kind of enemy henchmen, and if you didn't defeat enough of the henchmen, you get to face the boss. And so that is basically just an excuse to throw in models of boss characters that you can then fight, and reference really obscure, stupid Crash stuff that all of 12 of us online remember. So here's a few of those examples. They had the elementals from the Wrath of Cortex. They had the ant drones and zombots, which were just drone enemies from Crash Twinsanity. And they had Scorporilla, which is a drone titan enemy from Crash of the Titans, the Crash of the Titans duology. And so all of those, you could kind of argue they're not obscure because those three are quote-unquote mainline Crash Bandicoot games. But they're mainline Crash Bandicoot games in the same way that, like, Jungle Beat is a mainline Donkey Kong game. Yeah. Like, it still doesn't get referenced. So,
and it's like Jungle Beat is a mainline Donkey Kong game, but I see a lot of people online not recognizing it as such, and it often gets called a spin-off or a side game. And I'm like, no, that was the main Donkey Kong game for the GameCube. But that completely tells you the equivalency level of it with these other Crash games.
Yeah. So, you have these characters from games that don't get referenced. And some of them are kind of obscure drones. But, if you think of mainline Crash games not obscure enough, I can get more obscure than that, because in this mobile game, one of the enemies is called Pink Elephant. And Pink Elephant is a character that has never appeared in a Crash Bandicoot game. Pink Elephant was an enemy that was cut from a level that was cut from Crash Twinsanity, which is a game that famously had a rough development that ended up cutting large swaths of content that they plan to develop. And in fact, the main collectible in that game is unlocking concept art to show you that the game was supposed to be 3 times bigger than it ended up being. And so this character is just concept art from a 17-year-old game that they now brought back to life as like hopping out of this other dimension. We have this other dimension where presumably that means that the full realized vision of Twinsanity did happen in some other dimension, and everything can just cross over whenever we want to, which is just insane. So Pink Elephant, who doesn't even have a real name. His name is,
I was gonna say,
Pink Elephant.
Pink Elephant. That's like giant clam on the levels of shit.
But it gets, believe it or not, it gets deeper than that. It's, in my opinion, significantly deeper, because we have to talk about Mr. Crumb. Oh boy. Mr. Crumb. Mr. Crumb. Okay, so in 1999, Tiger Electronics released a dedicated handheld novelty toy Crash Bandicoot game for their 99X format game systems. I call it a novelty toy because I'm trying to give the understanding of how small and cheap these things were. It was not like releasing a handheld cartridge for a Game Boy. It was its own dedicated little device, just a step above what you could get in a Happy Meal. And
I mean, there was a Battletoads version of this, like these little handheld LCD games, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so, I mean, they weren't uncommon, but you would hardly think they would ever have an impact on canon of their franchises, or ever be referenced again. This game has nothing to do with any other Crash Bandicoot game. The plot is absolutely nonsense and nothing like what would happen in a Crash Bandicoot game. It's a plot where Crash Bandicoot breaks into a house that is haunted by a mean, rich old man ghost who has stashed his gold in the mansion but protected it by raising the undead. And none of these enemies or characters are from Crash Bandicoot. Hyle, you told me you played Crash Bandicoot slightly.
Yeah.
Does this sound like something that would happen in a Crash Bandicoot
game? No. This sounds like big bad Beetleborgs.
Yeah, and the screen resolution on these things is like 5. The sprites are incomprehensible. Yeah. And yet they took this final boss, Mr. Crumb, the mean old man ghost, and they have recreated him in 2021 with a new design that is in HD in a 3-dimensional model, and he is now a boss fight you can face in Crash on the Run.
Yeah, Mr. Crumb. I'm happy for the Mr. Crumb fans out there. Can you imagine?
I know. We've been crawling through the desert for 40 years, Hyle, and it's been rough. It's been rough. But it's probably makes sense to now that we've kind of encapsulated just how obscure this is, this utter devotion to the cult of character, which is the antithesis of everything else we're seeing in Donkey Kong.
Oh yeah. So this is where I get to take back over.
Right. This is like a Donkey Kong podcast or whatever, right?
No, but that does set the stage quite nicely for how we bring it back around to Donkey Kong. So, meanwhile, over on Donkey Kong Island, Nintendo and Retro, who of course is just working at Nintendo's behest here, they seem to be allergic. They seem to have been allergic, at the very least, towards actually referencing Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong games. Again, you said this is a positive episode. We don't want to get too negative, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a catharsis. There needs to be, for the last decade, Donkey Kong fandom has really embraced the positive, right? We haven't really been negative in a long time since Donkey Kong Country Returns. And part of that is like, we're just happy for what we have. We're not going to complain. We might not like this and we might not like that, but oh well, that's fine. But I feel like occasionally, you let up all you let all this hot steam build up without letting it out. You're going to explode. So part of this episode is letting out a little bit of the steam, while we're on the verge potentially of this new Donkey Kong revival. I feel like it's a good time to sort of exercise those demons, those mean old Mr. Crumbs from our bodies in order
so we can steal the gold.
Yeah, exactly. Steal the gold of positivity from the future. Now, yeah, Jeff, you and I have talked about this quite a bit in the last few weeks, it seems like, but a really good go-to way of framing the absurdity of where Donkey Kong is at, or has been in the last 10 years, is Retro wouldn't reference Ingard the Swordfish, but they were more than happy to throw in a reference to Billy Mitchell and the tanks from Super Mario Bros. 3. That's where Donkey Kong is at. And again, like, this isn't meant to come across as bitter or jaded. But, and the retro games are excellent. They contributed a lot to the overall tapestry of Donkey Kong's history, and I will always love them. But when the fandom had to unite and run what's tantamount to a massive international political campaign, when Nintendo gave us the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to influence Smash Brothers, just to get the main villain of the series back, it shows you how skewed things have gotten for us. Right. How off kilter the Donkey Kong brand has become under Nintendo, that it took all of our effort just to get the main villain of the piece to be acknowledged and celebrated.
Right. And you know, like you said, it's not meant to sound bitter and jaded, but if I may sound bitter and jaded for a minute, if you're making a video game and you're going to title this game Donkey Kong Country Returns, and you realize that while laying out your design priorities, that you don't have a place for Ingard the Swordfish in the game, because you're not really going to use animal buddies much at all, but also you don't even have underwater swimming levels, then you are doing it wrong. And you did that wrong. The game that has the title Donkey Kong Country Returns is incorrectly made. And in ways that at the time we were just too ecstatic to acknowledge or really comprehend or sink our brains into, they fucked up. I think Retro Studios and Nintendo did it wrong. They did a retro nostalgic revival without being, you know, they didn't do it right. So, but that's the bitter and jaded sentence out of me now, released like Mr. Crumb into the old mansion drapes or whatever he does. And now I can go back to sounding more positive.
Well, we'll come back around to the bitterness in short time, Jeff. Don't worry. The last time we had any equivalent fan service of this degree, it really was the Pay-On games, right? I mean, that was a weird time. The buyout era was weird in general for Donkey Kong and the Donkey Kong universe. Just a lot of drama, a lot of growing pains, and a lack of a core consistent direction, honestly. And we love the Pay-On games for what they were, but I don't think we really appreciated how of a rarity it would be to have the degree to which it reveled in the semi-obscure that it did. I mean, those games gave acknowledgement to minor characters like Quox the Parrot, and they incorporated mostly unknown baddies like the bats from off of Donkey Kong 64 and named them Flip Flaps. Just stuff like that I'm seeing in these new Crash games.
Yeah, I think that Copter, the playable racer in Barrel Blast, Copter, the drone enemy from Donkey Kong Country 3, that's kind of on the tier of some of these Crash Bandicoot characters.
Yeah, Pay-On, we're definitely digging deep for some of their pools, but it was always these tertiary side games that didn't get any promotion, and they sort of just died on the vine a little bit because the core Donkey Kong game at this time was a bongo platformer that didn't really get much traction. And there was this identity crisis for the series that was shored up with Retro's Donkey Kong Country Returns. And at that point, Pay-On didn't make any more Donkey Kong games. So, you know, the Retro games, and Jungle Beat before them, they went out of their way not to reference the past. And we know now that a lot of that is owing to Nintendo's admittedly frustrating corporate culture, frustrating for us more so than them. And that makes sense to a degree, the way they do things. Like, oh, well, we are not the team that created this character. It would be improper for us to have any say about this character. So let's not use this character and let's create a new character to use instead. And that's all well and good for a lot of franchises, but it's maddening when you're an average fan, when you're a layman, especially when you consider the unique position the Donkey Kong series has been put in, where Donkey Kong's home studio, the one responsible for, I would say, 90% or more of the characters and lore that appear in it, when they're no longer with Nintendo at all. They're owned by essentially the competition. And so this is not a situation like Nintendo R&D 1 not wanting to use Bowser or Peach in Super Mario Land games, because there's nobody to go to bat for these characters. Nintendo's not using. I mean, that was Payon, but Payon stopped making Donkey Kong games, and in the last decade, this really frames it for me. In the last decade, we've only had 7 returning Donkey Kong characters from the pre-retro era actually appear in Donkey Kong games. 7. And then K. Rool appeared in Super Smash Brothers. But in actual Donkey Kong games, we have had 7 returning characters.
Is that the 5 Kongs and 2 Animal Buddies?
Yes.
Oh, I don't want to get bitter and jaded, but I think that if you're going to make a game, you're going to call it Donkey Kong Country Returns, and you don't have a role for On Guard the Swordfish, you shouldn't be the people making that game. You did it wrong. Wait, did I already say this part?
Oh yeah, you're stuck in a loop right now.
I mean, the game didn't have. Did you know that they made the Donkey Kong game? They called it Donkey Kong Country Returns. Like Donkey Kong Country. Do you remember Donkey Kong Country?
I'm vaguely familiar.
Yeah, that new one doesn't have zingers on it. They didn't even put zingers on it. They did it wrong, Hyle. They fucked up.
Again, it's hard to think about how we just felt when Donkey Kong Country Returns was announced, and the glee and jubilation that, and this is how afraid we were as a fandom that it took 40 seconds for them to show Diddy in that trailer, but when they showed Diddy, we were just all on board. We're like, all right, well, Diddy's in it. Diddy's in a mainline Donkey Kong game. Whatever, fucking hell. I'm satisfied. Let's go home.
You know what? One of the most satisfying, nostalgic bits in that original trailer is you see Donkey Kong swing on a rope through a line of bananas. And you're like, man, I'm so nostalgic for that. And whereas the Crash Bandicoot games are over here like, hey, do you remember Tiger Electronics put this shit in your Christmas stocking? Here's Mr. Crumb, the ghost.
And, I don't know how much of this is there are actual Crash fans working on Crash games, whereas with Donkey Kong,
Wild.
I get
crazy.
Yeah, you wouldn't want that now, would you, with Donkey Kong? And that's not to say that people at Retro weren't Donkey Kong Country fans. That's not a fair assessment, because Retro also had a lot of the corporate bullshit to deal with from Nintendo and Tanabe's oversight. And I could get into all the rumor mongering there, and I'm not going to, because I don't want to name names, even though I just named a name. But it's
right, like Tanabe. We wouldn't name him.
We wouldn't name. I didn't give his first name, did I? I just said Tanabe. Could be any Tanabe, Jeff. I think that there's this weird misconception with Donkey Kong, and it's a twofer of a misconception. It comes from two ends. There is this misconception, or there was pre-Smash Ballot within Nintendo, that, well, there aren't really hardcore fans for these Donkey Kong characters. There's nobody adoring these characters like they adore Waluigi or whatever. So nobody's going to miss them. They would miss Cranky Kong, maybe. They would miss Diddy Kong. But nobody's really going to miss K. Rool, because nobody really cares about K. Rool. Nobody's going to miss Winky the Frog. These are all expendable characters. And so long as the gameplay is top-notch, fans will be happy. Because what fans really like about Donkey Kong Country, it was the mechanics. They don't really care about the characters. Yeah. Whatever, we can do better.
We're gonna make a pig that looks like a fucking asshole. We're not even gonna give him a name.
Until the second game, right, when fans complain that he doesn't have a name. How did we know that Donkey Kong fans would complain that we didn't even give him a name? I mean, wow, and that's a funny thing, too, that Retro really did course correct a lot with Tropical Freeze.
Retro said, once you give it a name, we're not allowed to kill him. So...
We have the luau booked and everything. Yeah, but Retro did do a lot of course correction when they actually listened to Donkey Kong fans. Like, I feel like I'm giving Retro shit here, and it's not totally fair and warranted. And they did do a lot of listening to the fandom after Returns came out, and they fixed a lot of that shit in Tropical Freeze. The little petty shit that we complained about that felt off for Donkey Kong. Like, as far as, like, the map screen presentation went, Professor Chops just being called the tutorial pig, they fixed that shit, and they called him Professor Chops. But it took, an entire game for them to realize that there are Donkey Kong fans with opinions and wants and desires. And they did do a good job of fixing what they could. And
like the bonus levels...
But they didn't fix the bonus levels.
Oh, yeah, no, I forgot I'm a sarcastic idiot.
Oh, okay. All right. But then there's also, I think, this critical opinion that was mostly formed in this buyout era, which is the GameCube and early Wii era, where, the Gen Xers took over the gaming media and really... a lot of them weren't necessarily fans of Donkey Kong Country because they didn't grow up with Donkey Kong Country. And so there was a lot of dismissive attitude there that, well, Donkey Kong Country characters are shit. And who cares? Donkey Kong is the arcade game, and we're more excited about Mario versus Donkey Kong, or to see how Nintendo can recreate Donkey Kong's world. And we don't really care about Dixie Kong. Hell, even the UK Nintendo magazine called out the Kongs and said they were shit characters. Nintendo Power in the US called Dixie Kong Daisy Kong because they didn't care. So there was a lot of this mentality that was baked in from the older gaming media, and then influenced the younger fans who are coming up into the GameCube era and also didn't grow up with Donkey Kong Country. And it took a while for the DKC fans to get into a position where we can say, hey, we love these characters, and it kind of sucks that you're giving them a short shift. And if the rumors are true, there are a lot of Donkey Kong Country / Super Donkey Kong fans at Nintendo EPD, which is one of the driving forces behind what the rumors say is happening. So, yeah, I'm optimistic for the future, but holy shit. They put Mr. Game & Watch in Donkey Kong Country Returns. They, reference Mario a few times in Tropical Freeze. And we can't even get and guard the swordfish. We're looking at rocks and trying to decipher K. Rool, like people looking at a stain on a wall and seeing the Virgin Mary. And
I mean, those rocks are just a Rorschach test. Retro doesn't give a shit about those rocks. Those rocks aren't real. They're not King K. Rool. And and I'll say two things here, Hal. One, sort of a tangent, but I want to say that when we talk about Nintendo culture, the kind of decision process that might inform why they do these things, I want to point out this is not an Eastern versus Western cultural mentality. It's a Nintendo corporate cultural mentality, because you have the likes of Mr. Sakurai at the Super Smash Brothers mountain where he makes his games, and he knows what's up.
Mean old Mr. Sakurai, the ghost.
In his mansion with his undead guarding the gold. No, Sakurai knows what's up. He's like, oh, I'm making a game that's like referencing the history of Donkey Kong. Like, the 3DS game, he made critters into enemies in the Smash Run mode. You have critters that you can fight as enemies along with the Tiki Buzzes or whatever they were called. From Returns, and then in the new game we have King K. Rool as a playable character, even though he's not been in a game in 100 years. And the final Smash is just the full-blown recreation of the Donkey Kong 64 plot with the blowing up Donkey Kong Island and Mecha Crocodile Isle. And it's like Sakurai knows, if I'm gonna go back and reference the history of Donkey Kong, the big games are probably at most 4. If there was a Mount Rushmore, it's Donkey Kong Arcade, Donkey Kong Country 1, Donkey Kong 64, and Donkey Kong Country Returns. And Returns doesn't even have anything in it that's worth referencing other than the vague visual style. So, he knows what's up. And you look at Camelot, when they've made spin-off games like Mario Golf or whatever, and they have to reference Donkey Kong, they know what's up. I think that Namco Games, when they've made Donkey Kong spin-offs, they know what's up. Payon is a Japanese studio, and they made some Donkey Kong games, and they know what's up. So it's like, it's just Nintendo. And I don't think it's Nintendo, because Nintendo's not a hive mind, but I think it's a few particular old guard executives with a certain idea of Donkey Kong that are...
For sure. And that's not even necessarily Miyamoto, because I feel like Miyamoto would have often gotten blamed for this in the past. Miyamoto was a...
But I'll put out right now, I would really like to not have him work on the new Donkey Kong game. Can I influence that?
You're allowed to say whatever you want, Jeff. You have no influence. None of us do.
Oh, that's true. I forgot.
But Miyamoto weirdly championed Cranky Kong. He's always fighting to get Donkey Kong games in development. Fighting. I don't know how much the guy has to fight. He can probably just blink and his wishes come true. But I think there is an older guard Nintendo corporate mentality that this serviced some things well, right? Like the aforementioned Super Mario Land trilogy. Was not made by Nintendo EAD. And that gave us characters, that gave us new characters like Wario and Daisy that are beloved today. And the only difference, though, is that Daisy and Wario weren't permanently replacing pillars of the Mario cast because those characters were still appearing in EAD's concurrent games. So you weren't being deprived anything. If anything, you were just adding to the tapestry that fans love. But this corporate mentality has kind of, I'm just calling that for lack of a better term. It does even hurt Mario fans and in the long run because, or maybe Wario fans, because, how many people have wanted to see Waluigi in a proper Wario game, but you're not seeing it because that's not that studio's character. Waluigi was created by Camelot, and so Waluigi is kind of a man without a kingdom. They feel comfortable putting him in spin-offs like Mario Kart, where you need warm bodies, but that's it.
Look, and I don't want to get political. My favorite sentence. I don't want to get political. I just think that if you were born before or during, or if you remember the Vietnam War, if I had any influence personally, would ask you not to work on the new Donkey Kong game and let somebody who played Donkey Kong Country in their life make the game and who likes it.
I am optimistic about the purported new blood at Nintendo who are fans of the things we're fans of. Because like you said, this isn't a Western culture versus Eastern culture thing. One of the most tiresome misnomers out there about Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Country and the franchise in whole is that Japanese gamers aren't Donkey Kong fans. They don't like Rare's creations. That is bullshit. That's not true. There are tons of fans everywhere for these characters, including Japan, including within Nintendo. And I think we are getting to the point where that old guard has less say in how Donkey Kong's going to operate. So fingers crossed. I mean, we're still we're still so bruised and battered that we're thinking, well, obviously Dixie's not going to be in the new game, right? We're just hoping that the Kremlings are there, and barring that, we're just hoping that K. Rool is in it. So at most we're just hoping that Donkey, Diddy, and K. Rool are in the game.
And barring that, I'm hoping I don't have to just buy a plastic peripheral to play the game.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'm looking every time we bring them up, I peer over and I look at my stack of DK bongos.
I do the same thing. I only have one of them, but
it's like they cast a shadow at certain times of the day. The shadow falls on me, and I can feel my mood drop.
They cast a shadow behind your eyes. And another thing I wanted to bring up is a thought that was put in my brain by our friend Cameron. Which is, we talk about some of the things that Retro did choose to reference, and it's like, really? You're going to reference Billy Mitchell and the tank from Super Mario Bros. 3, and you're going to reference kind of the level layout of the Donkey Kong 3 arcade game, and you're going to reference Mr. Game & Watch and the Metroid games, but you're not going to have zingers in a game that you claim is Donkey Kong Country Returns, like a liar would claim. But one thing they did an amazing job of, specifically in Tropical Freeze, is referencing Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Yes.
As a direct sequel, there's such a really well laid out connective tissue between those games, whether it's the return of Squidicus in the now underwater level. There's things like the Mama Squeakly frozen in the cave when Donkey Kong Island is frozen over. Really, all of the final world of Tropical Freeze, the frozen over Donkey Kong Island, is just one thing after another referencing Donkey Kong Country Returns. And that is awesome. But where it leaves something to be desired is just, wouldn't it have been cool to see that level of attention to detail in their kind of, even if you're not going to give me On Guard to ride on underwater, and if you're not going to give me zingers as enemies, but just that kind of environmental storytelling and background Easter egging that they did such a good job of when they wanted to, but their priorities of what to reference were so out of whack. I mean, the best thing that we got in those games is just a sprite of Donkey Kong standing on a mountain from the arcade game. Or some red girders in the foreground when you first enter the factory world. But I thought that the title was Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is what you would call it if you're a liar.
But that's a good point, Jeff, because it was great to see Squidicus back, or the Mama Squeakly being frozen in a block of ice, or AI, the giant eyeball artificial intelligence of the factories. It was wonderful to see all of those back, and that's why when I say I want Donkey Kong characters in Donkey Kong games, I'm not just referring to the Rare era. I'm referring to the totality, the entire history of Donkey Kong. I want characters back from Jungle Beat, from the Payon games, from Retro's games. I don't want anything left behind. I want this to be the equivalent of a big snowball that keeps rolling down a mountain. I just wanted to get bigger and more up its ass with each roll. And that's what we didn't get with the Retro games. That's what we haven't gotten in the last decade plus of Donkey Kong. And that's what, looking at all this Crash Bandicoot revival, all of these entries and all of this fan service. Fan service is thought of as a bad thing. And I don't understand why. Because you don't want to get so insular that you're, being off-putting towards general audiences, but I don't see how things like Yaya the Panda would be a deal breaker for grandma looking to buy a game for little Billy or Tiny Sally. I don't think it is. I think it's, and you honestly think Nintendo Anonymous Tanabe that I'm calling out. Do you honestly think that it would be a slap in the face to Steve Mails or Kev Bayless to use one of their characters? No, they would be fine with it. Like, they would love to see those characters back. They don't care anymore. They haven't made Donkey Kong games in decades.
And you know what else I'll say is that, you know, I'm not saying that a game needs to just be a parade of references with no substance to it. I think you need to make a good game. And I think that is where Nintendo comes from things, but then they go too bare bones with it at times. And when I say Nintendo, I mean specific people when they're in charge of specific teams, because there are other teams that are allowed to be as self-indulgent as they want to, and they get away with it. And you have Super Mario Odyssey, which is one of the most fan-pleasing referencey games in the Mario franchise, and you have Splatoon, which is a game just chock full of world building and stupid characters and stuff like that. But, you know, you can make a good game, and the thing is, I'm not saying that Retro needed to divert attention away from making a good game to put some attention into these Easter eggs, because their game is already full of Easter eggs. They made a game that's deeply layered with background elements. They just had bad ideas of what those things should be referencing, and or had bad advice or bad instruction from on high on what they were allowed to reference, because we know they played all the old classics. And I think that in a lot of little subtle ways, gameplay ways, style ways, background, you know, little elements in game design throughout those games are clever, deep cut references. But it's a reference to a moment of gameplay. It's a reference to a style, and it's not a reference to a character.
Yeah.
Which is the difference with what Crash Bandicoot has done.
And I think one thing that unites both Crash Bandicoot fandom and Donkey Kong Universe fandom, if you want to get broader with it, is we have a love for characters, I think, first and foremost. Yes, we love the games. Yes, we love the gameplay. Yes, we love this and we love that. But at the end of the day, what do we talk about the most? We talk about the goddamn characters, because they're full of life. They bring the world to life. And it's fun to obsess about these eccentric personalities. And it's been frustrating. It's been hard. It's been a hard go of it to continually celebrate these characters when you feel like Nintendo hasn't cared, and they are dismissive of them, or oh, we don't have a 3D model of that character, so let's not use it, because it would be too much work to make a 3D model of this character, when fucking Mr. Crumb over here, like an asshole, is smirking at them.
They made a model of a fucking tank. You know how big a tank is?
Yeah, I've heard like arguments that, well, they won't be bringing back Chunky because they never gave him a new model, so it's just too much work. Like, come on, like that. It's why is it always like considered this monumental feat to get a Donkey Kong character back? Like I said with
how many models did they make? How many original models did they make to create Donkey Kong Country Returns? The backgrounds are chock full of one-time use models.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can take the time to make a Billy Mitchell statue in Donkey Kong Country Returns, but they can't, you know, again, referencing, I know Ingard is our go-to, but that is the most blatant, silly, like, what the hell? How did you screw up not putting the iconic swordfish that everyone knows, everyone remembers?
And the only reason that my go-to is on guard is because Funky Kong and Dixie Kong showed up in the sequel. But before that sequel came out, you could look at a game that said it was a Donkey Kong Country game, like a liar would say, and you could say, but there's no On Guard, and there's no Funky Kong, and there's no King K. Rool, and there's no Zingers, and there's no Neckies, and there's not a single Kremling.
Yeah.
And the title is lying to you.
And I love Donkey Kong Country Returns, and I'm not going to stop loving it, but I feel like 11 years of playing nice about this. I've had it, Jeff. I've had it. Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled has pushed me over the edge, and I'm going to start being assertive for myself, and I'm going to start saying, yeah, I want some fan service my way. Yes, please. Thank you. And no, just putting Cranky's gramophone in the first level of Tropical Freeze doesn't count so much. Maybe it was the third level. I don't remember.
You know what would be cool? The first world of Tropical Freeze is all these downed aircraft, right? So
yeah,
how fucking awesome would it have been just in a background shot to have like the K Cruiser, the ship from Donkey Kong Country 2 that K. Rool climbs up? That could just be a downed aircraft, or like the spaceship that Xananab the banana alien uses from Jungle Climber.
Yeah. That would have been really cool. But they did put an airplane with the P-wing on it. So from Mario, Mario, and we love Mario, don't we?
What about this?
Everybody loves Mario.
In Returns, they had a plot where they said that the plot is that the Tikis have hypnotized Donkey Kong's animal friends, and then a bunch of fucking rando stranger animals are stealing his bananas because they said they're his animal friends, like a liar would say. and then throughout the game, they're like, hey, remember that generic no gives a shit elephant, giraffe, and zebra that you hate? Or, I don't hate them, but I don't know them. So, remember them? They just put them in the background of like multiple levels throughout the game. Now, if you're not going to have a bunch of playable animal buddies, which I think is already a bad design choice, but if that's what you're going to stick with, yes, putting background cameo of instead of generic zebra, giraffe, elephant, it's Ellie, Espresso, Winky kind of situation, That's the kind of shit that would have gone a long way to assuage the issues we had with what was not, front and center. Like, I can't ride on guard, but wasn't it awesome that one level where he jumps out of the background if you stop and pause and look in the background at the right time, and he jumps out of the water and, like, does a flip? You're like, man, that's on guard. I know this. That's from what I remember.
That would have been great. That would have gone a long way. That's one of our go-to complaints. And just like, what the hell were you thinking? You have a plot where the animals of Donkey Kong Island get brainwashed, but you don't use the animals we know and love. It's just, and maybe the idea is, well, we can't use them because fans will be upset that they can't ride them. So it's better we just don't bring them up at all. It's like, you're not going to make us forget about Engard and Winky and Espresso and Ellie and Squitter. You're not going to just erase our memories. This isn't Men in Black.
Get over yourself, Tanabe. On Guard is the godfather of my children. I will never forget On Guard. On Guard was the best man at my wedding. I love that swordfish.
It's a shame that your spouse drowned that day, but that's what you got.
Me and On Guard were busy, and he couldn't swim to save her. Anyway, do we have calls?
We got some calls. We have a couple calls now. If you called in and I don't play your call, that's because some of the calls I felt like would be better served for a future Call Sack episode, and not so much the flow of this episode, which is just petty and snippy.
Can I just say I had no idea that's where you wanted to take it. I
didn't either. I was just like, I've got some things I want to say about this goddamn Billy Mitchell statue that's been getting up my ass. And then from there, we fucking lost it. But, I was going to go into this like, oh, isn't it great what Crash Bandicoot is doing? I want some of that. And then it just became, kind of angrily clenching our teeth and fist, at some of the decision makers at Nintendo the past decade. But whatever. I'm mostly over it at this point. Mostly. But anyway, I will be playing your calls if you call it in and you don't hear it. I'm sorry. It was just for time and also clarity, cohesiveness. I've decided to save your calls for later. But we do have two calls. The first one is actually the second call from Kevin Folgers, aka Gothic Teddy Bear. So let's hear what he has to say.
So I actually wanted to get to the point on more related topics to characters and such. This is about the worry that perhaps Nintendo's not going to, or they've already been kind of only been using the Donkey Kong Country cast minimally. The thing is, though, they don't really have a choice now. Now they have the merchandise department splitting off Mario and Donkey Kong in half. So now Donkey Kong's going off to have his own merchandise line. And so that means they can't just have, I know that Pokemon's got new Pokemon every generation. They can make a whole, plush toy line of every generation of Pokemon. It's not like that here. If they're going to have their own brand consistency and their own brand identity, they have to have consistency. We can't have the one-off cast. I know that, so it's like, even if they wanted to, keep wiping out, with a big tidal wave, everybody but Donkey and Diddy, or whoever they consider essential every time, they can't really do that now, because it's like, now Donkey Kong Country specifically is the theme park's, well, at least it was the theme park's ultimate setting, and that's going to have that gift shop along with the merchandise line. Now it's like the brand is becoming an internal structure, and they're trying to differentiate it from Mario. But what has Mario always had over the years? A consistent line of characters. I know there were a couple bumps in the road like Super Mario Land, but even then, it's like Wario and Daisy sometimes appear in their own material, but they still got Mario, Bowser, Peach, the foundationals. Donkey Kong Country is the best-selling variation of Donkey Kong. They have to have Donkey Kong Country as the brand going forward. I'm not saying we're going to see Cat o' Nine Tails and Hogwash, but I mean, I think now they got to embrace it. They don't have a choice, because the brand has to financially sell on its own in merchandise and in its own line of games and the theme park. And how do you get a brand to grow? Consistency. Consistent cast of characters. And they're finally coming around to it being Donkey Kong Country. Feel it. May the force be with you.
Well, thank you for the call. Now, Kevin's point here is that going forward, Nintendo sort of has to commit, right, to having a core Donkey Kong cast, because there's a lot riding on the success of Super Nintendo World, and they've made all these moves to make Donkey Kong a important brand, a pillar of Nintendo going forward. And that's, apparent even without the rumors and leaks about a new Donkey Kong game coming. So, Jeff, do you agree with the assertion here, or do you think...
I don't know. I think, look, if the new game says we're going to have a bare bones core that is Donkey, Diddy, and King K. Rool, if that comes to be the case, just as a hypothetical, you think of a gift shop at a theme park. I don't necessarily assume that the Donkey Kong gift shop will have to have 10 characters, or else they don't have enough to sell plushes. You know what I mean? If you have 3 characters and you have, some barrels and banana themed items and whatever, you have more than one different style of Donkey Kong pose and stuff like that. And, I'm at the point where I think that Donkey Kong games are always going to default back to a small core cast, and it's just going to be a case of how small and how core is that cast, who is expendable, who is not. And I think that if this new Donkey Kong game comes out and we get to see it soon, hopefully, or not, but when we do get to see it, I think we'll get a peek into what Nintendo's thinking is, which is who do they think is essential? Is King K. Rool really going to just be a mainstay now since he was in Smash? Are the Kremlings going to be back as kind of the main baddies? Or are we going to have it more like how it's typically been, where between Jungle Beat's enemies and then Returns as Tikis and then Tropical Freeze's Snowmads, where they just kind of make up new enemies as they go all the time, and there's nothing really iconic to stick around? I think Donkey, Diddy are the only two I have any degree of confidence about. And if you were to grow that number to say something like 8, which is the 7 that we've already had this decade, if you were to say the 7 we've already had plus King K. Rool, then I think that's optimistic.
Yeah, like I said.
Go ahead.
Well, Jeff, I know you have been one of the more cautiously.
Yeah, I want to say
pessimistic.
Yeah, but I'm nervous.
You are.
I'm like waiting to see. I'm very much like this could be way. every bit as bad as you worry it might be, it absolutely feels possible it could be. But
whereas I, regardless of this chafing I'm feeling about the character choices and the lack of a celebration of the cast from the past decade, independent of that, I'm more cautiously optimistic because I just feel like Donkey Kong needs a stable home again for room for growth. And we didn't really even have that with Retro. So, I'm just glad to have one of my boxes ticked off. And I'm hopeful that maybe more of them will get ticked off along the way. But I'm not even optimistic that we'll see Dixie in this. I was just like, Donkey and Diddy and probably Cranky and hopefully K. Rool. And boy, it'd be great if they remembered the Animal Buddies, but I'm not optimistic there either. So, who knows? But yeah, I mean, I see Kevin's point, and I think going forward there will at least be consistent brand identity for Donkey Kong. I don't know how far downward that will extend though. I look at all the merchandise that has been released since Donkey Kong has been its own merchandising brand. I'm looking at it on my desk right now. I see a lot of Donkey Kong stuff, I see a lot of Diddy Kong stuff, and I see barrels and bananas. And that's basically it. So I'm not, entirely convinced that this is going to start a trickle-down effect where we'll be getting plush Noddies in the giant millstones. That would, could you imagine? That's the kind of world. I go into a toy store or a toy department and I see these rows and rows and rows of Mario toys. Every Mario character you can imagine has a toy or a plush. And I'm just like, oh, wow, that would be the life, wouldn't it?
Well, and I'll also say this. If you do have the opinion that I don't necessarily agree with, but if you think that in order to satisfy some kind of quota for merchandise, that Donkey Kong needs more than a couple characters that are mainstays, that doesn't mean that the characters that they choose to do that with will be returning. They could be creating brand new characters to then start propping up. And you might say, oh, wow, Donkey Kong has such a history. There's no way they're going to add a new character that's just going to become a mainstay now. But they do it with Mario all the time. You go back to, even just what's in Smash Brothers. Toad? Toad is not in Smash Brothers, but Rosalina's in Smash Brothers. She's from the Wii game. Bowser Jr.'s in Smash Brothers from the GameCube game. And you look at Odyssey, which brought back Pauline, who's not a brand new character, but now all of a sudden Pauline is a huge character appearing in all the spin-offs. And so even Mario's cast is not static. Mario's cast is changing. When you look at the spin-offs, they go in and out of relevancy. There was a long while where the kind of GameCube stuff like Petey Piranha and Bowser Jr. and Piantas and Nokis and stuff, those were in everything. And almost all of that's been phased out, except for Bowser Jr. You don't see Petey Piranha hardly ever anymore. You don't see Egad in anything anymore. You don't see Toadsworth in anything anymore. So the cast is fluid. It fluctuates. A brand new game will elevate a character, and then all of a sudden that character is a mainstay for a while.
Do you remember how everybody was so salty that the Koopalines were never referenced anymore, and now it's just like, oh, fuck the Koopalines.
I know, it's like now we have 9 or 10 or 15 characters in a game that are just Koopas with shells on with different haircuts. They did the number of them, and I'm I'm looking at
which that's how you just described how a lot of people tried to write off Donkey Kong's cast. God. Oh, just a bunch of monkeys with haircuts.
Oh God, I did it. I did the bad. But what I'm saying is a brand new Mario character can suddenly come out of nowhere and be relevant. There was Nabbit, the little bunny freak from New Super Mario Brothers, and then he started appearing in spin-offs. And it's like Mario has a lot bigger cast of characters that you would consider quote-unquote essential, and even Nabbit, a brand new random-ass character, is replacing those from time to time. So yeah. I don't think any character in Donkey Kong is sacred except maybe Donkey and Diddy. And they could come out with a new character tomorrow and say, well, what did I say on our Stream of Thieves? I said Toucan Nana, the toucan whose beak is a banana. Just they could come up with some new shit just because they want to, and then they're just going to push that just because it's what's the newest shit.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'll go the other way around. I don't think that whatever plush they want to sell at Mario World is going to dictate how they make their video game.
I agree. I'm hopeful that we'll get some more. I'm hopeful to expand beyond 8 characters, Jeff. 8 returning characters, and I'm hopeful as the series has a greater degree of permanence and isn't just this perpetual thing that crashes on studios' couches for a while before it gets kicked out. I'm hopeful that, with that foundation, we will have more room for indulgences and fan servicey nods every now and then, even if it's just putting a character in the background and not really using them. That would, hey, I'll take what I can get, right? So,
and you know what? Sorry, go ahead. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. But what were you going to say, Jeff?
I was just going to say, and I don't think it's hopeless. When I say that we might get 8 characters is as a very optimistic guess, and that we're probably going to get less than that. But the notion that we could get significantly more than that, I don't think is impossible either.
Yeah.
And I think that you could totally see, especially some of the rumors are saying like, well, we heard this is going to be a 2D side-scrolling game or whatever. And who knows what it's going to be. But especially if you go with a 2D side-scrolling game. Are they going to do everything brand new? Maybe. Are they going to be like, no, the gimmick of this game is that we went back to doing Animal Buddies. So we've got like 5 of them plus a couple new ones. Like that could always happen. They could, if it's a 2D side scroller, they could just be like, by the way, one of the enemies you encounter is Neki the vulture and it spits out the eggs. And you're like, I remember Neki. I remember zingers. Like this stuff might never show up again, but I'm not coming out here and saying like, oh, I don't think it's ever going to show up. I totally feel it's possible. I just don't know what's going to happen.
Especially post-Smash Ballot, where they got a direct pipeline to fans, and it was like, oh, it turns out people like Donkey Kong characters, or we like this one Donkey Kong character you forgot about, so maybe you'll start considering the other Donkey Kong characters. And also, post-Odyssey, you look at what EPD has already referenced in a mainline Mario game. And did you ever think Radley the Rattlesnake would be referenced in a Mario game? I sure as hell didn't, Jeff. But here we are.
That's his cousin Rattly.
Oh, fuck. Always creating a new thing to replace something old. All right. Let's take our second call, and then I think we're going to play a game after that.
Ooh. I hope it's a Crash Bandicoot game.
No.
Okay.
Wow. Hey, it's your friend Dustin. Looky. Talking about 2 of my favorite game series on the planet. So, my top 3 game series, Banjo, Donkey Kong, and Crash. And 2 of those 3 are in this episode. That's so crazy! But, yeah, I love Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. It's probably my favorite kart racer. No, it's definitely my favorite kart racer. I just love that it has so many characters. It's just a huge celebration of the Crash Bandicoot series. It's awesome that just so many characters from across the entire series are in this one racing game. That's just so cool. It would be awesome if Donkey Kong got something like that. Imagine a Donkey Kong racing game. Maybe someday, am I right? But let's say they do make a hypothetical Donkey Kong racing game. And let's say the roster gets to be something akin to this. What characters would you want in it? Or never mind. Instead of what characters you would want in it, pick one character you would want in it, and then think of a racetrack for them, a home track. In CTR, not every character gets a home track, but a good chunk of them do. So, yeah, pick a character and then make a track for them. Thanks, Kongversation friends. Have a good time talking about Crash and Donkey Kong. Bye!
Well, that's our friend Dustin, and Dustin sort of tapped into the game we were going to play.
Yeah. Can I just say, the more that Dustin is genuinely excited, the more insincere he sounds to me. And I urge everyone listening to this, later to just rewind a couple minutes, listen to his whole call, and imagine he's being deeply sarcastic, because it's gonna hit great. But yeah, I think this ties right into what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So I think our plan is a little bit more ambitious than even what Dustin wanted. And that's just like a Donkey Kong fan going in with low expectations and then hoping that they will be met or exceeded. And so, Dustin, this is your lucky day. So, Jeff, what game do you have in mind?
Well, we were looking at all these obscure characters that we've called attention to from Crash Bandicoot. Snarky McOrange Mouse, whatever we call him. And we thought, what if we each went in blind here? We didn't discuss it with each other, but we're gonna name 5 Donkey Kong characters, obscure characters, that would just be mind blowing and awesome to kind of see them make a modern day appearance. Okay, and so I'll tell you, Hyle, we didn't really go over parameters, but for my own list, I made sure to specifically choose stuff that's under Nintendo's umbrella. I didn't choose anything that Rare owns, anything like that.
Same.
Cool.
I wasn't like, I would love to see Mildly Naughty from Banjo-Kazooie. Like, no. I didn't use any Diddy Kong Racing characters that aren't owned by Nintendo, or that aren't owned by, that aren't owned by Nintendo, which is very few. I kept it legal and legit. Now, Dustin threw us a curveball and came up with this idea that, like, if this was for a racing game, imagine if there was a track attached to them. So I don't know if you want to, like, on the fly.
I'll do that for 1 character. I can't do that for 5 characters.
I think I can do that for all 5 of mine.
I could, but all right. Yeah. All right. Let's do it. We're doing it.
Okay. All right. So how do we want to do this? Well, I think we should do a back and forth here.
Alternate.
I'll do one, then you'll do one. And I'm assuming, knowing us, we'll probably have a bit of overlap. So
I tried to get out there with mine. I wanted a variety, so we'll see what happens.
I wanted an eclectic mix that would hit all eras, but I also came from the perspective of this being a racing game. So I specifically tailored mine to who would be cool to see in a racing game versus who do I just want to see back. Because honestly, 5 characters, that is a tall thing to ask from me, because there's probably 60 Donkey Kong characters that I want back at this point. And I consider them all just pillars of the franchise, because for me, my
is that
very
a reference?
small...
Is one of your characters the Tiki Pillar?
Screaming Pillar?
The Screaming Pillar?
No, but we'll be seeing the Screaming Pillar probably at the Donkey Kong theme park. According to the diorama, they're going to have those in there. But I kept this non-drone characters too. These are all individual characters, but I decided to narrow it down to who would be best served for a racing game, how that would really pay tribute to their character too. So that's where I came from, but I'll go first. And Jeff, I'm sorry that I'm the one who first reads this. I'm going to go with Brash Bear.
Oh, golly.
Brash Bear from off of Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. Now, I picked Brash Bear. Was Brash Bear on your list?
No, surprisingly.
Son of a... What? All right. Because
I knew, why would I put Brash Bear on my list of 5 when I could get him for free off of your list of 5?
Wow. You're
why
thinking
buy
like
the milk, Kyle?
You're thinking like a true penny pincher. Oh, wow. Just clip those coupons, Jeff. I picked Brash because the Brothers Bear, me and a lot of the DK Vine Illuminati, we really love the Brothers Bear from Donkey Kong Country 3 and Donkey Kong Land 3. They're just ridiculous. When we made the joke about the Kongs just being monkeys with haircuts, I mean, the bears are even more to that degree. They're just bears with some ridiculous stereotype attached to them. And that works. It works for me. They're memorable characters for as little as we see them. And I feel like so many of them could be plugged back in future games for different purposes. Like I wouldn't want to see all 14 in one game. That would be ridiculous. But I remember back when Donkey Konga 3 had been announced before we knew it wasn't coming outside of Japan. And someone made this falsified, we still don't know the origin behind this, but somebody made the falsified artwork of a cel-shaded Barnacle Bear and said Barnacle Bear was going to be in Donkey Konga 3. And that just blew everyone away. And we were all thinking, well, what role is Barnacle Bear going to have in Donkey Konga 3? And ultimately, people have gotten their hands on Donkey Konga 3. They played through as much of it as they can. They see no reference to Barnacle Bear. But that really put the idea in my head that the Brothers Bear could come back. Just like one of them could come fill a role in some game. I really wanted Bizarre Bear to be in one of the retro games to run the shop. I know, right? But so Brash Bear, if any of the Brothers Bear are going to come back in any sort of competitive multi-character romp, Brash Bear should be in it because he is the jock, the competitive meathead, the one who takes pride in competition, and the one who would make the most sense to be in a Donkey Kong racing game. And so Brash Bear is my first choice. And if we're going to attach a track, then give him Riverside Race from Donkey Kong Country 3.
Love it. And you could probably drive up like a hollow Kremwood tree. That'd be some shit, man.
Yeah.
I'd play that. All right. So I'm going to go first. I didn't necessarily think of my list as racing game characters.
That's fine.
Kind of generically thought 5 characters of any.
Because here's the thing, even though mine are racing game characters, they're all characters I really want to see back too. So that was the easiest way for me to narrow it down. So I wasn't throwing in all of these characters and all these ideas because we would be here for 4 hours or more, Jeff.
Yeah. So my first character, I'm going to say this is a character that is obscure in the grand scheme of things, but is not going to read as obscure to fans like you and me.
Yeah.
And it's a character called Xananab, the banana alien from Donkey Kong
Jungle Climber.
Fucker! Is
that
on your list?
That was the third one on my list. So
all right,
we
can grouply to discuss Xananab and Xananab's potential stage, but yeah, Xananab is, I would say, okay, that claim is wrong, but I was gonna say it's one of the only really kind of memorable original characters that Payon made to put their unique, because Payon used a lot of returning characters, and they used a lot of returning enemies. So when they created something unique, like an NPC named Xananab, who's very, very involved in the plot of that game, it's almost like, this character is emblematic of the whole Payon era. This is their unique stamp on it. And then, of course, you could look at Barrel Blast and talk about the unique Kremlings, the female Kremlings and the children Kremlings. Those are very, I think, popular among fans. They'd want to see come back. But I didn't put them on my list. I went with Xananab because he's just such a weirdo.
Yes. He is, I think... Payon introduced a lot of characters I like. Xananab is their most memorable character by far. He's the character that stands right up there with the Rare era cast and kind of just instantly falls in with them. And you're like, this is the weird kind of nut bar who would show up in one of Rare's games. And just even the concept of this alien, this extraterrestrial race of banana people is just right up there with some of the nonsense that Rare, tailored. Because, Rare's Donkey Kong games, they were down to earth as much as they could be, but then they had these out of left field indulgences. Banana birds, for one. So, banana extraterrestrials from the planet Plantain. That is just good shit. That right there. And Xananab's way of speaking that incorporated the Banana Fofana song. Is that even in Japan? Is that just it could be an English translation?
Yeah, I don't know what the Japanese version of the game says.
Maybe Gibbon would know. I know.
Well,
Gibbon
if he doesn't, if they don't, then Gibbon, that's your homework. Your homework is to look into Jungle Climber's Japanese not translation, but the original Japanese text.
Bet you didn't know you would have homework, Gibbon. But yeah, Xananab is just a fully realized NPC. Xananab is unique in the role he functions in Jungle Climber, but there's room for future appearances.
That's something I like. When you look at something, I know you're not going to be super familiar with this. The Sonic the Hedgehog series does a thing a lot where they'll introduce a character that's very integral to like that one game's plot in a way where it kind of doesn't make sense to ever bring them back, or if they do, it's very jarring. There's nothing that prevents Xananab from just popping into Earth for no reason. Hey, I have a spaceship. I'm here to say hi.
I like the idea of the Kongs having an extraterrestrial ally who just pops up every now and then. Like Donkey Kong Island has this interstellar alliance with the planet Plantain. That's the kind of world building where that's only possible with a slow building throughout the years of your universe, until the point where like you go into it and you're like, wait, what now? But yeah, that's why I would love for Xananab to just pop back up every now and then. Doesn't have to be an every game occurrence, because I wouldn't want this weird Banana Man extraterrestrial to be in every game. But every now and then would be nice.
Yeah. Especially a big racing celebration. So as for a racetrack, I was imagining, so there's like these villages of like banana huts and houses that are shaped like bananas. And then a big part in Jungle Climber is the spiral warp like device that creates these warps that you go through a portal and you're in another weird place. So maybe they could have like the banana hut village on Planet Plantain, and you drive through a warp and you go to other like wild little vignettes of the racetrack, like the weird toy box world, or maybe like the weird like vegetable world, like giant cobs of corn or whatever.
Yeah, that would be cool. That was what I had for track 2. I had Planet Plantain, but I hadn't incorporated the spiral warp, and I think that would be the finishing touch to really sell it. It would be similar to the Barrel Blast Cosmic Highway.
Yes.
Yeah. So you would have like a double pay-on reference
Which
there.
I contend is also a track that sees you travel through time into the future and then back to normal time. But
that's your theory about that.
We'll analyze that game someday.
Someday, yeah. Okay, so that was kind of we kind of doubled up there, Jeff. So do you want to go with your second one, since I talked quite a bit there too?
I could go with my second one, but then if it doubles up with you again, it's just we're gonna snowball. So why don't you go and see if you double up with me?
This is fun. It's like, how much of a hive mind do we share? My second character, who I had before Xananab, and these aren't like ranked or anything. I actually just went in vague chronological order, although that's not true either. I don't know. My second character was Crunch from off of Diddy Kong Racing. Crunch is one of the few Diddy Kong Racing characters owned by Nintendo, by virtue of them retconning the alligator character that they had in the game as a Kremling once Diddy Kong was added to the game for better thematic consistency. And when they did that, Nintendo automatically got the rights to that character. Not that they've used them. But Crunch is a critter who is individualistic. He's unique. He had a character arc where he was sent to Timbers Island to spy on Diddy and the others to make sure they weren't up to any anti-Kremlin chicanery, and ultimately befriended them, got invested in the struggle against Wizpig, and came out of it an ally. And that was the first time a Kremlin has really been portrayed in any heroic sense. The closest we came before that was Klubba, and Klubba was never an ally. Klubba just also kind of hated K. Rool, but Klubba would just as easily fuck you up. So for me, Crunch was the first time we were able to view a Kremlin and say, hey, you know what? They're not all bad. The political structure they live under is bad. And that was an important life lesson for young me. It taught me some valuable insights about don't judge a book by its cover, Jeff. And I haven't. I try not to. But anyway, Crunch. I love him. Hasn't been used enough, and I thought it was kind of shocking that Payon didn't even use him in Barrel Blast. And the only reason I think they didn't go to that well, when they had the whole conceit of Barrel Blast was Kongs versus Kremlings, is Crunch wouldn't really work on the Kremling side anymore, and also Diddy Kong Racing DS was a contemporary game, and maybe it was just like, well, we shouldn't use Crunch because Rare is using Crunch in Diddy Kong Racing DS.
I also think it's a bit of a minefield where they just think, like, we don't really want to go through the trouble of finding out what we can use. It's like, I think that the lines are pretty cut and dry with Diddy Kong Racing, but it's this well that they have never gone back to, so they don't know exactly what they own. They'd have to, like, and it's just, like, easier to just not touch it than it is to, like, try and do the research.
Well, also, it's the fact that they could use Crunch, but then they can't promote Diddy Kong Racing. There's no cross promotion there because Diddy Kong Racing is mostly owned by Xbox, so mostly owned by Microsoft. So it's kind of like, well, what's the point? Let's not reference that. But if we're talking full fan service, they could reference him. They could use him. So I vote yes. I vote yes on Crunch. And so my idea for a Crunch track, since Timbers Island is a minefield, and it, you power up your oil slick and you get a mine, but you don't want to get that bubble because fuck that bubble. But because Timbers Island is mostly owned by Rare and Microsoft, let's do something different for Crunch. So the idea that, post Crocodile Isle, but pre-mechanical Crocodile Isle, where were the Kremlings living? We know Crunch and this unnamed critter compatriot, this colleague of his, they were on Donkey Kong Island spying on Diddy. And where did they come from? So my idea for a Crunch track is the Kremling base camp in the Congo jungle, this kind of resettlement camp for the Kremlings post-Crocodile Isle. I don't have any ideas for it. I just would want to see it.
Yeah,
because it has to exist.
That'd be good. I'm into that. Yeah, I was really thinking, how's he going to come up with a track for this? I was curious, but I think that works. I like that.
All right, so you go.
So I'll go. So I will say about my list of 5. 1, like I said, I wasn't thinking of racing specifically,
That's fine.
or else probably Crunch would have come up. But 2...
And Xananab, there's nothing about Xananab that screams racing character. He's just a character I really wanted to see, but...
Right, and if we're going to have something akin to Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, you get 56 playable characters. Most of them are just in it because they're Crash Bandicoot characters, not because they're particularly racers.
That reminds me, too, I would be at a disservice if I didn't reference this. Crunch's name in Diddy Kong Racing was originally Crash. Crash with a K, because of the enemies in Donkey Kong Country, the critters in the minecart, they were Crash. That was changed relatively late in development because they were afraid of legal problems because of the existence of Crash Bandicoot.
Well, that just goes to show you, don't judge a Crash by the first letter of his name. Yeah, so another thing with my list, I purposely tried to get more out there, with especially after Xanadu. Some of mine are pretty out there. Stuff that I thought you wouldn't say. And for that reason, Crunch isn't on my list. But this list of 5 are 5 characters that if you gave me 56 Donkey Kong characters and none of these 5 were on it, I think I'd still be happy. Because none of these are like things that I can't live without. Whereas I would be noticeably disappointed not to see Crunch. So I went harshly obscure with these. So my next pick is a Brothers Bear. It is Bear.
Oh my god!
I thought Bear from Donkey Kong Land 3. I figured you would do it like an updated version of just Bizarre Bear, because they're basically the same sprite. But since Donkey Kong Land 3 was like basically monochrome, right? You could retcon it that Bear has gray fur, like he's really old. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't think too deep about it, Hyle, but I thought Bear would be a hilarious character, especially if it was the only Brothers Bear in a gigantic roster. And you're just like, here's Bear. He's old and he's a bear, and his name is Bear.
Well, that would be the like fan jokey, like inside baseball humor that what was it? Hasty.
Yeah.
Hasty would be, because Bear has been an in-joke among the Donkey Kong fandom for years now, based upon the argument, well, is the Donkey Kong Land 3 Brothers Bear Bizarre Bear or not? And, Super Mario Wiki famously said, no, it's Bear. And then we're like, Bear? And from there, the joke, was adopted to the point where Chris Alcock is claiming Bear is Banjo's father. So just a lot of history behind that. So I wouldn't be opposed to that, even though I still argue that it's probably Bizarre Bear in Donkey Kong Land 3. If you were to come in and make Bear an official part of the canon, I wouldn't be complaining.
Yeah, so as far as the stage track goes, I'm kind of thinking of the overworld kind of look of Northern Hemisphere, thinking about where Bizarre Bear's shop is. You could have Funky's garage and you're driving alongside the water, and you could go through a Banana Bird cave, and then you come out the other side and do another lap or something like that. Something simple, but the going in the cave would be kind of cool with the light up crystals and banana birds flying around.
That would be cool. It'd be cool if you could incorporate a little bit of the Simon-esque, like, I'm not saying like full on like memorization game there, but if you could incorporate like hitting the crystals and activating something.
Oh, maybe there's like a crystal path you could drive on, but only if you hit the crystals on the, if you hit the red crystal on lap 1 and the yellow crystal on lap 2, then the blue crystal path opens up and you get a shortcut. Oh, man. Hyle,
that would be cool.
Let's go make games.
Wait, we have good ideas. I don't know why nobody listens to us.
we insult them a lot, and then we start saying our ideas.
Okay. That's probably not the way to go about it then. Okay. Yeah, Bear. You've sold me. All right. I guess I'll go. Now, my third choice was Xananab. We already discussed Xananab. So, do you want to go ahead and give your...
Sure. I'll give a fourth one. My fourth one is Pink Donkey Kong Jr.
Oh, my God.
Pink Donkey Kong Jr. from Donkey Kong Jr. Math, I think, on my list of 5, is probably the character that is most in line with the kind of obscure things that the Crash Team Racing guys did when they got really obscure. This is the kinds of very obscure things that, and I think you kind of mentioned that you didn't think that Donkey Kong as a franchise had as obscure things as some of the examples we've shared. I think this is kind of in that vein. But Pink Donkey Kong Jr., I mean, you could rebrand him. You could say, you could give it a new name. Maybe call him Pink Funky Kong Jr. or something. It's just something stupid. I think maybe you had the theory in the past that it was Swanky Kong.
Well, that's going with my idea that Donkey Kong Jr. is just young, modern Donkey Kong, which is controversial. I realize it's become a controversial position in the fandom.
Well, actually, you know what? I didn't think of this ahead of time. This is what I'm going to say. Put a character in there. It looks like Donkey Kong Jr., but it's pink, and name it on the select screen Candy Kong Jr. And it's a female, and you could, and now since it's not a sprite, you can do it up with more details in 3D and make it, but hey, who doesn't want more girl characters in the game, and especially cute little baby characters that everyone loves? It's nice to have variety of the kinds of characters. So Pink Donkey Kong Jr. retconned as Candy Kong Jr. Wait, not Candy Kong Jr. Hold on. That's not what I mean. What I mean is it's baby Candy Kong.
Right.
Baby Candy Kong. Yeah.
Now, this brings the idea in, is it going to be like Mario Kart Tour where you have a sprite of Donkey Kong Jr. in there, and then you also have Pink Donkey Kong Jr. You could go that route if you want to really celebrate the obscure. And still like skirt the issue of Donkey Kong Jr.'s identity in the modern context. You could do that, or you could just go in and say, no, that was actually young Candy Kong. Now we know.
Right, and I think that even if you don't address Donkey Kong Jr.'s, who it is, if you just say, by the way, this other little Donkey Kong Jr., if you just say, that's baby Candy Kong, I think the implication is that the other one is baby Donkey Kong. You know what I mean? So you don't have to address it, but you would be directly implying it, which I would find to be a fun thing to do. But I really don't know what I'd do with a track here. Because I mean, assuming there would already be a character that has just a generic arcade, 25M type of track as their home track. But maybe, I don't know.
Something to do with math. It would have to be something to do with math. Maybe like a graphing calculator.
Yeah, or like it could be a variation of a 25M style course, but it just has now had all these new obstacles of giant numbers added to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. It would be weird. No matter what you do with it, it's going to be weird.
It would be one of those Smash Brothers stages that nobody plays because they're so frustrating and
this
weird.
This is the Pac-Land of our game.
All right, well, that was a good one. I'm going to keep going. My fourth one is Calypso from off of Barrel Blast.
Great one, yeah.
Now, I picked Calypso because I really like a lot of Peon's contributions to the franchise, to the series. And for me, Calypso is probably my favorite of the new Kremlings in Barrel Blast, the individual Kremlings that the game introduced. I like Kip and Cass, but Calypso is I think the most fully realized of the bunch, in that in the various backstories given for her, she runs a nightclub that's a popular destination for the Kremlings. And so I really like this idea that Calypso is sort of this this popular figure in the Kremlin nightlife scene. And I don't know. I think there's avenues to explore there, to see Kremlin culture post Crocodile Isle again. And Calypso also, allows you to have, more female characters in the game, which is, I think, always important in traditionally character rosters that are dominated by the boys. So yeah, bring in Calypso and have her stage be Calypso's nightclub. It could be like this 1950s Cuban style aesthetic.
I was fully picturing like Crazy Kremland, like a nightclub in the vein of that kind of look, and like flashing lights and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, I totally could see if the Kremlings have Crazy Kremland, then I can picture them in a nightclub also.
Yeah,
I love it.
All right. So
my next one, I also feel pretty confident is not on your list.
Okay.
And okay, so in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, in that game, there are a lot of characters that I think could, boss type characters or other characters that I think could appear or reappear in a modern game. But I wanted to get really specific and obscure with it, so I didn't choose any of those characters. What I did choose is there's this armadillo who looks real mean. There's this armadillo, he looks real mean, and Donkey Kong basically punches him into space. And he's like mean mugging you the whole time, and then you punch him into space. And I want to race as that armadillo.
Okay. Just that armadillo. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I know.
Yeah.
It just, that's a weird pull. You're right. That's not on my list.
Oh, damn. I don't know if he has like an English name, but what I would really like is if on the character select screen, when you hover over this character, if it actually just said on the screen, real mean armadillo.
Yeah.
This is the real mean armadillo.
That would be the equivalent to pink elephant.
Right, exactly. I want to play as real mean armadillo. And okay, but as for a stage, I'm gonna go with the Jungle Beat kind of Western desert cactus aesthetic in some of those those levels. You know the ones I'm talking about.
I do, yes.
And that would be the level for Real Mean Armadillo.
Okay, all right. Well, do you have another one, or is that the end of your list?
I have one more.
Okay, so I cheated a little bit, and I got a 2-for-1 deal in my last one. So I think I want to hear yours first because I'm kind of doubling up.
Okay, well then I feel super confident that mine is not yours.
All right,
because mine is not doubling up, and also I knew from the start this wouldn't be yours.
Okay,
this is for the Idaho boys. But I think a lot of people. This isn't really even for myself, but a lot of people would be pleased by this.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no! If we're gonna,
I know where this is going.
If we're gonna get obscure with it, if we're gonna go out there, if we're gonna try and touch the whole history of Donkey Kong, Bluster Kong is my choice for my 5th character. Bluster Kong from the cartoon show. And okay. You're upset.
No, I'm not. I'm not upset because I knew this was coming. I think with Bluster, there's some issues. I would maybe question, like, does Nintendo even own Bluster Kong? Because there's issues with Nelvana maybe owning some rights to them. I don't think it's a character Nintendo would ever touch or consider because of that. Same reason why you never see any characters from the Super Mario Brothers Super Show and its derivatives appear anywhere.
Okay, but then we make a legally distinct tribute to him, like Hasty is.
Yeah. Okay.
And we call him Fluster.
Fussy Kong.
Fussy, yeah, something. I mean, there's got to be a better name. I mean, Bluster is already a shit name for a Kong.
It is.
It doesn't follow any of what makes a Kong name good, but... You know, we're not going to think live on air. We're not good at improv. You write into us over on Twitter or on the call-ins, I guess, and let us know what you think another name for Bluster Kong should be. And then with that, we'll move on. Well, no, actually, we can't move on because I have to name the stage, the track.
Oh.
I have to name a track. And so I would go with the Barrel Factory, Bluster's Barrel Factory, which would be partially inspired by the show, but also partially trying to fuse that visual style with the factories we already have in Donkey Kong country games. So yeah, just kind of a factory level, but explicitly a barrel factory. And maybe you could like drive across a giant barrel on an assembly line, or I don't know. You could get creative with it. The Barrel Factory, that's my choice.
No, I like it. I would be okay with taking Bluster and sort of recontextualizing him to make him work in the games. The same way Rare took Crystal Coconut, the Crystal Coconut, and made Crystal Coconuts, or even Tiny's basic design was heavily influenced by Dixie in the cartoon. So yeah, I mean that would be, I think, acceptable to me, as much as I kind of hold up my nose at the notion of putting Bluster in an actual canon Donkey Kong game. You know, there are ways to do it, and it would be nice. There is the segment of the fandom that adores the cartoon, or the cartoon was their introduction, and I don't want to belittle that because, you know, it would be like the same reason we don't want to belittle anybody who the buyout era games were their first Donkey Kong games, or the retro era games were their first Donkey Kong games. Whatever brought you into the fold, you know, maybe we should welcome and embrace, even if it's not to our taste or liking. I
want to point out in our live stream chat that, which you can listen in to if you become a Patreon. But Gibbon has pointed out that the name of the Real Mean Armadillo is Golmondo.
Golmondo, yes, that's right.
Golmondo. Which, if you want to call it Golmondo, that I'd be fine with that. But if they call it Real Mean Armadillo, I'll be even more happy with that.
What if it was Golmondo, the Real Mean Armadillo?
Like parentheses, yeah. Like Golmondo, parentheses, Real Mean Armadillo. I'm into it.
Business card.
No, yeah. A Real Mean Armadillo is like the scientific name.
Right, like Looney Tunes. It just comes up under... Yeah. All right. So my last choice is cheating because I couldn't pick between them. So the talk of like all these obscure characters, I was thinking of like what would be an obscure pool that would be pleasing for the fans, for the long tenured fans who have been through it all. What would make us happy the most? And so there are two characters, and you might know where I'm going with this now, that were almost Kongs, but couldn't quite get through development. And they're also quite the pair when you consider them as such. I'm talking about Redneck Kong and the Hatted Kong that goes by many names, but I like to call him Commuter Kong from off of Donkey Kong Land. So these two characters, and one is just a naked Kong with an outie belly button and a fedora or something. Objectively shit. Looks hideous, but there's potential there. And Redneck Kong, we always talk about Redneck Kong. Redneck Kong doesn't even make sense because he's a hillbilly. And what? And also, huh? And he's just this dumb hick with big buck teeth. And I guess it's offensive, vaguely offensive. But I don't know. You could make it work. Whatever. There's potential there. Redneck Kong. And what if they were like this buddy duo? It's just like one is this urbane professional, the other is this moonshine swilling rube. What if they were besties? I think that would go a long way towards healing us.
I think that my favorite suggestion for the names of those characters, and I apologize because I don't know who thought of this. Somebody on the DK Vine forum at once in the past came up with this, not me. But they, as a duo, their names could be City Kong and Country Kong.
Yes.
So just to accentuate how they're a pair.
Well, that also goes into my track idea. So I thought for the track, call the track City and Country, and you could have it be Big Ape City, but let's be honest, it would be New Donk City under the current regime. But you could have it, you go through the streets of the city, and then you go out into the countryside, the rolling hills and farmland. City and Country.
Oh, you drive through like a big red barn, but in all of the stables are like rhinos.
Oh, that's the way to do it. That reminds me of Donkey Kong 2, where you could see like a carnival, but like the merry-go-round were rhinos, and it was all like Kong themed.
Love it. Yeah.
Redneck Kong and Commuter Kong. And also I like the story idea, which I brought up in our Inner Circle Discord, of like Commuter Kong. His whole purpose for being in the game is he's late for work and he took a wrong turn and now he's stuck racing. This
is just his car. This is just the car he takes to work.
And he's just trying to get to work, and he's stuck in like 40 races, and he just wants to get to work.
Oh God, this is great. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. But that would make those characters canon. Those fabled cut Kongs, and that's I think an equivalency to some of those Crash characters.
Yeah.
In Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled.
Yeah, and Hyle, you know what? I think we really could play this game we just played. Literally we could come back next episode with 5 new characters each, and probably still maybe only have one overlap. And we could do this over and over, because there's so many characters that, I mean, at this point, every Donkey Kong character is an obscure pull, almost.
Yeah.
And I'm just, in my head, as we're talking, I'm thinking of more. I'm thinking of Tox the Parrot from Tropical Freeze. Or what about, like, the Scurvy Crew Pirates from Returns, but they're all 3 stacked on top of each other, racing in one cart.
Yeah.
You know, you could do this all day, and it's, honestly, I'd like to. We're not going to, though. We're not going to. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. There's so much potential here when you look at just the history, and you don't even need to go towards weird pulls, like, because there weren't any Tiger Electronics Donkey Kong games. But you know, I think that like the deepest pull you could make would be Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze, as like something that only 12 people on the planet really know about. That would be something. There's one of those hippos from Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze. But I mean, a lot of this stuff, a lot of Donkey Kong has a higher profile than Mr. Crumb does. So,
and yet at the same time, a very high profile game like even Donkey Kong 64, it feels like 90% of the stuff in that game would be seen as extremely obscure today.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Scuttlebug.
Trough and Scoff as like main NPCs are still like, they'd be insanely obscure to Donkey Kong, to outside of hardcore Donkey Kong fans,
Could you imagine the fan reaction if Trough and Scoff came back? Like, can you imagine how much that would blow up DK Vine on that day?
I would want them to be canonically in a relationship. I think that'd be awesome. But yeah, no, I mean, just seeing, can you imagine it gets like leaked and it's like a blurry photograph of a screenshot and you're like, look at this blurry photograph. And we're like, what the fuck? Is that Scoff? Is that Scoff? And then it comes out later and it's actually just like, I don't know, an illusion. That was probably what would happen. I got myself sad again. No, but like
you talked yourself down from your own fantasy, Jeff.
It's hard to dream, Hyle. I've had such a hard life as a privileged fan of video games. But yeah, this has been fun, and I don't want to go out with the negative, bitter, feeling. I had fun talking about these characters, many of whom we'll probably never see. But that I think that hope springs eternal, and it's like thinking of stuff like this and seeing it happen for other fandoms. It does give you a little hope.
It does, and it does make me feel happy for other fandoms when they get stuff like this, and like. I'm still riding the high of getting K. Rool back, as ridiculous as that is. Yes, I'm riding the high that our main villain came back, but also, Banjo and Kazooie being in Smash, and then their trailer paying tribute to the shared universe, which is only, really celebrated and recognized by people like us and other weirdos. So, I mean, I don't want to say like we haven't had good things come our way, because that's just not true. But it is discouraging, and that's why I've gotten discouraged over the last couple of weeks when these rumors started up, and when we were reflecting on Donkey Kong Racing the other week, and just thinking, wow, it's just crazy. Billy fucking Mitchell, I can't get past that. Like, out of all the things you could reference in your game, that's what you reference. It's just, well, it is what it is, but you're right. We don't want to end on a down note, and at least there is hope for the future. So long as there's a glimmer of hope, and not a hope for glimmer, just a glimmer of hope, then I'll take it.
Yeah, and you know what I'll say too is that it's been fun to look at what is happening in Crash Bandicoot and then play our game of like, well, what are the most obscure things that would be just mind-blowing to see? And I'm not going to be mad if my list of 5... I'm not going to be mad, Hyle, if Real Mean Armadillo never shows up in a game again. I won't be upset. But playing around and thinking about it has been fun to do, and it has also just made me appreciate how excited I'm going to be if and when somebody making a Donkey Kong game knows what they're doing and puts on Guard the Swordfish on it.
Well, Jeff, weirdly, the place where the most Donkey Kong characters are currently appearing has outpaced the amount of characters who appeared in the last Donkey Kong release, which was Donkey Kong Adventure, the Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle DLC, and is actually catching up fast to the last major Donkey Kong release, which was Tropical Freeze. And I'm talking about Mario Kart Tour, which has 4 of Rare's Kongs in it. Also has Donkey Kong Jr., arguably Pauline, if you want to consider her a Donkey Kong character. And Jeff, my initial impressions on Mario Kart Tour, they weren't good. I was pretty down on the game at first. And anybody who's been following DK Vine on social media or has been talking with me or hearing me talk has known that that's kind of changed a little bit. So I was thinking maybe we could squeeze in another episode before the E3 coverage starts. And Jeff, would you like to be on that Mario Kart Tour episode with me?
Well, 2 episodes in a row about racing games, Hyle? I don't know.
Oh, come on. Come on, baby, don't be cold as ice. We could be traveling on the one after 909. Just like the Kongversation, to be referencing the Beatles instead of Donkey Kong.
A reference that only you and I give a shit about. Sorry, audience.
Yeah, we could have brought up and guard the swordfish, but we don't fucking know what we're doing.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.